With 40 miles of steep bluffs and sandy beaches, the San Mateo County coast is a paradise. From above, multi-million-dollar homes nestled between farms paint a picture of scenic wonder. But if we look closer, there's a harsh reality that not even this view can hide. A secret that was easy to keep until January 23rd, when prosecutors say a disgruntled farm worker opened fire on fellow workers at 2 mushroom farms.
Engine 41, medical aid for shooting victim, mountain mushroom.
7 people were killed in the mass shooting, all farm workers. Authorities say 66-year-old Chun-Li Zhao killed 4 of his co-workers at California Terra Garden and then drove to his former job at Concord Farms and killed 3 other people he used to work with. Zhao told investigators he was upset over working long hours. A breaking point for him might have been a $100 repair bill for damaged equipment. As authorities investigated the tragedy, they were confronted with the secret: deplorable conditions that farm workers and their families were living in. Days after the shooting, San Mateo County Supervisor Ray Mueller visited the site.
It's basically a storage shed.
He posted photos on Twitter. They show a gathering space with plywood for floors, walls made of plastic, camping stoves for cooking.
Horrible, horrific, deplorable conditions. We saw basically what looked like sheds, storage containers that people were living in, no insulation, no running water, nowhere where you would ever want to prepare food. It's a mess.
Cal OSHA is looking into workplace safety and health violations, as well as labor violations, since some workers say they were being paid below minimum wage. ABC 7 News spent multiple days in the San Mateo County coast searching for answers.
So nobody here pays rent?
How do these workers fall through the cracks of labor laws and basic housing standards? And did frustration over living and working conditions lead to this tragedy? Turns out that social services agencies have known about these conditions for years. To them, this was no secret.
This is nothing new for us. We, on a regular basis, were there at least once a week for the past 3 years, giving resources, giving food, giving their rain gear, whatever we can do to make a difference economically.
Nonprofits like Alas and Puente de la Costa Sur have been advocating for better housing for farm workers for years. Farms allow these groups to go onto their properties and provide resources for workers. These agencies know the living conditions are bad, but they worry about the reality of reporting it. The site could get shut down, the residents evicted. They could easily end up homeless.
As a social worker for 5 years, I many times walked into situations where there were concerning living conditions, and then you're faced with the reality that if I make this report, or if I tell this family to make this report, then they are just not going to have any housing available to them.
It's a catch-22 generated by the high cost of housing.
Housing industry is very expensive. Halfway is very expensive. That's why our farm workers, they pretty much live anywhere they can. They're renting a small space, the garage, in the living room. They're renting a couch. Just a place to sleep, and that's it.
We went to the small plaza on Half Moon Bay's Main Street. This is where farm workers pass the time. To them, this space is like a living room until it's time to sleep.
We call it La Placita Cultural sometimes because we have do a lot of cultural celebrations. This is where they hang out. People get together here to socialize with other community members because they're not able to go where they sleep. They only go there to sleep.
Do people have a place to spend the night? Yes. Do they have a proper place to live? Some.
How many of the farm workers who live in this area live in crowded conditions?
Most of the farm workers that live in this area live in crowded conditions. So because the rents are so high, 2 families rent one place so that they can afford the cost. I know families who live in trailers and they pay $1,000 a month. It's the only way that they can afford to actually pay for it.
Like the rest of the Bay Area, Half Moon Bay, Pescadero, and other communities along the San Mateo County coast face a housing crunch. An average one-bedroom lists for nearly $2,500, out of reach for a farm worker making less than $30,000 a year.
Farm workers not only live in the farms, crowded, some really bad conditions, but also live in their community. They rent an apartment, they rent a house, but they rent per room. So they get together with 2 or 3 other families and they rent a room. So that's the parents plus either 1, 2, or 3 kids. They live in a room, in a garage.
Joaquin Jimenez is vice mayor of Half Moon Bay and the farm worker program director for ALAS. He estimates there are about 2,000 farm workers in Half Moon Bay. At least half need better housing.
Half Moon Bay is an agricultural community, farming, ranching, fishing. So every decade we see less farm workers in our community, less farmers in the community.
Reality is that the lack of housing is now transforming the economy around Half Moon Bay. The agricultural industry has taken a hit in recent years. In 2018, this industry grossed an estimated $150 million. Those numbers plummeted by 2021 to $98 million. Now, both farmers and farm workers say they're struggling to survive.
If we lose our farm workers, farming industry of the coast is going to disappear.
And the key?
And the key is to build housing. We need that housing.
In 2017, San Mateo County had 241 farms. That was 1/3 less than just 5 years earlier. By 2019, only 81 farms remained. Many left because they simply can't find farm workers that can afford to live in the area. Farm workers earn less than 50% of the poverty level in one of the most expensive places to live in the country.
This is not like it used to be.
DJ Burns is one of those farmers still hanging on. His family has owned Bianchi Flowers for 4 generations.
I grow pumpkins, flowers, and oat hay.
Now he makes money year-round as a landlord, not just a farmer. So you're only renting here to farm workers?
No, I'm not going to say that. I started out doing that. But what do you do when you've got a farm worker family and all of a sudden they got a chance to make more money doing something else and they're living here? Do I throw them out? What do I do? We're headed to the farm worker trailers that I have.
How many do you have?
I have 7. I was approached to house some workers, and that's how I started doing it.
How many do you currently have here?
We got probably the total of everybody on the ranch is probably 60 of us.
But not all of them work here.
No. I got a part-time guy that works, and then I got 3 permanent guys that work.
How much are you charging them?
It varies. I don't want to get into it because then it just starts a lot of, it varies.
What's the range?
Like I said, I think from like 1,200 up to roughly 1,700, and there might be, 2 or 3 people that are breaking that up.
Besides the 7 trailer homes for families, Bianchi Flowers also has 2 barrack-style homes for single men. Hola, Ramon.
Hola, ¿qué tal?
Ramon Perez is a foreman at Bianchi Flowers. He lives at one of the homes with his wife and 2 kids.
Queríamos saber si nos puedes mostrar tu casa.
Sí.
He showed us his home.
So you've lived here for how many years?
Over 25 years.
Okay. And how much do you pay for rent?
Nothing. He provides the rent for the workers.
Can you show us around?
Yes. For this, the kitchen, couch and the TV, and we got 2 bathrooms.
This is not how many workers live, though.
Not all the bosses provide good housing.
Afterwards, Burns agreed to show us the home for single men.
I have 10 workers here, 5 rooms, and the conditions are going to be different here than was in the family's trailers. There's a lot of wear and tear here. You'll see here that there's some floors that need to be repaired from wear and tear of the linoleum.
How much are farm workers paying to live here?
Here they pay $300 a month.
Everything here works?
Yeah, oh yeah. All the refrigerators, the stoves. whatever they got works. If they don't, they tell me and we replace them. We're not going to abuse them. We're not going to have them live here and just to collect rent. I'm not going to do that. But there is a cost to take care of these houses. I mean, a big cost to take care of.
Jesus has lived here for 6 years, even though he doesn't work at Bianchi Flowers.
¿Y qué te parece vivir aquí? What do you think about living here? It's good.
Está bien.
It's good.
Es good. Pues uno quisiera dormir en un hotel 3 estrellas, pero pues no te alcanza uno el dinero.
You would like to sleep in a 3-star hotel, but you can't afford it. It's too much.
Okay.
Everything Jesus owns is in this room. Packed to the ceiling are his belongings and tools, along with his roommates. Inside a drawer, he keeps 2 Ziploc bags with a stack of photos. This is a glimpse into his dreams.
Lo compró en México.
You bought this in
Para
Mexico,
cuando me vaya, pues,
so when you go back,
trabajar allá.
that's what you're going to work on.
With the little that he makes working at a nearby farm, he pays for rent and food. The rest he sends to Mexico to buy tools, hoping to open a business one day. His family keeps him going.
Those are your daughters?
Esta no me conoce desde que me vine, nació allá y
Wow,
no me conoce.
that one doesn't know you in person. You've never met her.
Yeah.
What's her name? ¿Cómo se llama?
Carmela y Aurora.
Carmela and Aurora.
Yeah.
¿Cuántos años? How old are they?
María Elena tiene 26 años.
26 and 18. ¿Y esta no la has conocido?
No, no la
You've
conozco.
never met her in person.
Yeah.
When days get tough and this room gets cold, he goes back to this drawer.
Pues ahí los guardo uno y hay como un sueño.
You put them away,
Sí.
and that's your dream.
Ya un día que se vaya uno para México, pues ya.
Go back to Mexico one day
A vivir bien allá.
to live a good life over there.
Well, I'd love to have a better place for all of them, but I can't afford it either. Sure, I'd like to get new ones, but you know, that's expensive, and you got to have the revenue to do that. You know, so we try to do what we can do. That's what we're here for. Try to survive.
The county's Department of Environmental Health inspects housing sites, but not all of them. Only those with 5 or more farm workers require a permit. Smaller properties are outside the scope of inspectors, as are those not registered with the county housing program. If no one complains, they remain hidden. They remain secret. San Mateo County officials say neither California Terra Garden nor Concord Farms were permitted for employee housing.
These people are like family to us.
Housing at Bianchi Flowers is inspected every year. Burns is also the president of the San Mateo County Farm Bureau. He said the bureau didn't know people lived at the farms where the shootings took place.
We didn't realize what was going on there. We don't even know the people there. They don't associate with us. They've never come to Farm Bureau. And we were totally surprised at what was going on in there.
Farm workers are also afraid to report poor living conditions, mostly because of their immigration status. More than half the farm workers in this county are undocumented. They live in the shadows.
Farm workers sometimes are afraid about speaking up. If someone has to ask their landlord to fix something, they're going to hesitate to bring it up to light because they don't want to put their housing in jeopardy for anything. It's time for them to speak up, but it's also time for them to be heard.
Rogelio Nabor Martinez has worked in farms for 22 years. He has 2 jobs to provide for his family. His daughter, who's a college student, hopes to become an immigration lawyer one day to help this community.
Muchas personas viven donde trabajan porque a veces los dueños de los ranchos o los dueños de los farm no les cobran mucha renta. Entonces a veces muchas personas dicen, está un poco mal o un poco sucio, pero no me cobran mucha renta.
8 families lived at California Terra Garden. They paid about $300 in rent. The operators of the mushroom farm dispute accounts that people lived in deplorable conditions. They say state officials inspected the mobile homes. After the shooting, the units were red tagged and the residents had to move out. California Terra Garden is working now with local officials to build permanent, regulated housing on another part of the farm. San Mateo County has also set up a task force to inspect all the farm worker housing along the coast. But bringing housing up to standards is expensive.
We have a moment here in San Mateo County to really do something that will strengthen our agricultural economy.
Supervisors approved $750,000 to house the families affected by the shooting. That covers only 1 year. San Mateo County has a loan program for landowners to build or refurbish housing for farm workers, but officials say they need help from the state to meet the need.
The county cannot solve this problem. And it's simply, we don't have the resources.
Out of the 36 farms that I know, 2 were successfully able to add housing to their farms in the last 15 years that I've been here. And I have witnessed also places that I visit where the mattresses are on the side of the living room, which is also the dining room and often also the kitchen. And there's mattresses on the side because they put them down at night for an extra space for people to sleep.
Jimenez is searching for solutions. We met him at this old nursery that closed in 2019.
This property has a lot of potential. So it's a possibility for community members to start their own business as a nursery owner. It could be a distribution center, a possibility to build, farm worker housing. So just think about it. You work and live at the same location, but with proper housing. It should not be a tragedy, to make change happen. It should not take 7 people to lose their lives to make things like this happen. It is unfortunate that many people try to ignore what is happening in their communities.
Jimenez is also looking at lots owned by the city that are big enough to build 100 or more units. The dream is to build more homes specially for farm workers, similar to this complex, Moonridge. This is an affordable housing community built by Midpen Housing. The Associate Director of Development, Andrew Bilak, gave us a tour of their site.
It's 160 units.
At some point, the people who got a lease to live here were farm workers, but at this point, they may be construction workers. They may be doing other types of jobs because of how hard hit the industry is right now.
Yeah, I think that's definitely possible. There were also some people who moved in here who weren't farm workers to start, but at least 50% of the people when they started here were farm workers, and that circumstance may change for some people.
The site has a basketball court, a soccer field, a community center, and a child care center. But there are 240 people still waiting to rent a unit here. Midpen is developing multiple projects from Petaluma to Santa Cruz and this housing development near Half Moon Bay.
Midpen itself is working on another project just 10 miles north of here in Moss Beach, which will be 71 units and include 18 units that will be reserved for farm worker households. I think we need to, continue to serve other people, not just farm workers. I think farm workers are a key part of the equation, but I think we want to make sure we're serving, broader people who need housing as well, since the need is so great. Having access to an affordable home is really just a foundation for having better health, for having a higher quality of life, for being able to accumulate intergenerational wealth and pass that on to your kids.
In a place where it seems like time stands still, time is actually running out for the agricultural industry.
Agriculture is going downhill in this coast in San Mateo County. I'd say in the next 10 to 15 years, there will be very, very little agricultural on this coast if we don't do something now.
After the mass shooting, county officials are feeling the pressure to do something.
It's hard enough right now, actually, for farmers and ranchers on the coast to make it. So there's actually a very strong argument to go ahead and have the county provide this housing, let farmers and ranchers focus on farming and ranching, and then provide equity and ensure the public health of farm workers, that no one gets into a situation where our most vulnerable slip through the cracks.
Como trabajador del campo, Deberían de valorar más nuestro trabajo. Nos traten más como personas. Y que hagan apartamentos, casas, para que las personas no vivan en esas condiciones.
Now that the secret is out, farm workers are hoping to feel valued, and they say housing is the start. If you or someone you know is in need of housing or information on housing rights, you can go to abc7news.com/takeaction. You will also find information on donating to organizations offering resources for people impacted by the Half Moon Bay shooting.